Hi, everyone. I am Donna Reed, and this is Donna Reed Talks Voice. And we are going to have a little bit of a discussion with the last three singers that I've worked with in the last three episodes. So, hi, everybody. And the discussion is led by the fabulous, amazing Nellie Beavers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us again for another season of Donna Reed Talks Voice. We've just been filming your episodes, and they will have already aired at this point in the release states. But in watching your lessons, this always happens every single time we do this. There's been a theme that we've gone through, and a couple of those themes I'll just give you a heads up about what I'm gonna start talking about with all of you and getting your opinions on, is the changing of genres, because all of you have multiple genres in under your belt, and how you either have made the transition from that genre or switch in between them as you in your daily practice. Also, Donna, I'll have you lead a discussion about the balancing of the registers, because I know we had pulling head voice down and pushing chest voice, or bringing chest voice up, and all of that. So I'd love to get your pedagogical theories on that, and then also how it applies to each of us. And so we'll start there, and then if any of you have anything to add or any questions for Donna about either each other's lessons or your own lesson, then that's a great time to do that. So that's a lot of information I just said. So why don't we start with talking about genre switching, and how you work on that and how you deal with it in your own life. Michelle, I'll start with you just because you're first on my screen right now.
Oh, um, well, in the last couple of years, I've just solidly focused on doing classical, but I've sang with choirs that have a more contemporary sound to them. In terms of balancing them, I think it's been more about being conscious of having a good technique and adding on top of that, just adding style and interpretation. Because if your technique is solid, or if you have a good understanding of it, you can always switch gears while you're singing these songs. I've experimented more with mixing, because sometimes if I go, let's say like an F5, a G5, that's very high for my chest voice, so I just try mixing. Um, I haven't sang too much crazy belty pop music. I do find that Whitney Houston, some of her songs like I Will Always Love You, they don't tend to be that high, and the parts that go really high is very much head voice, so I feel comfortable singing those type of songs. Jazz is also very forgiving in that way, because you can sing a more chesty style or a more head voice. Same thing with musical theater. If I do musical theater from like the golden era, like the 40s, the 50s, the 20s, or 30s, it's very head voice if I were to want to do that. I feel that in general, singing classical has helped me to sing all these different styles and not affect my voice in a negative way, because I can always go back to the foundations and sing appropriately or with good technique and form.
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah. Priya, how about you?
Sure. So, as a lover of multiple genres, and really someone I've never wanted to be restricted to the type of music that I sing, because of my upbringing with like a very classical focused like music education, when I thought about pursuing singing professionally, and other artistic endeavors in the performing arts, I really felt restricted because I didn't feel like my voice was able to, like, in spite of so much study, I didn't feel like I had, a voice that could really compete with, classical performers. And so now, when I'm, now that I'm doing music for myself, really, and like centered on my songwriting, and also like in my religious organizations, working with choral groups, I've really enjoyed finding a vocal pedagogy like Cornelius Reed, where I'm able to revisit my classic, my wide range, and start to sing classical music again with freedom. But yeah, so for me, the journey has been not so much balancing, but at a certain point, kind of letting go of one genre, or based on my inability to really have the freest voice. And so I kind of was pigeonholed into like soul, some more like indie pop music. And now I'm, really excited about the prospects of just being able to sing all genres again. Because I know my voice can do it. It's just I wasn't able to successfully do it for some time. So that's been my journey with the switching.
That's so interesting with the thought behind feeling constricted by a particular genre, and then actually like finding your way out of that and back to it, but also like even more broad than before, just from having felt constricted about it and finding your way through that. That's really interesting. That's lovely. Maria.
Yes, first of all, I am sorry for my English. It's not my first or second or third language, so I hope you will understand.
Don't worry about it.
It was a great question. I was always asked for myself, is this possible, in fact, to sing things like gospel and lyric at the same time? So when I started singing, I had this chesty lower voice. In fact, my father told me always, "Oh, you're a mezzo, you're an alto." In fact, he told me. And then I start my lyric studies, and they told me I am a soprano. So I was very, very surprised. And then I continue in that way, but I lost all my chest voice in my training, in lyrical training. And then I wanted to gain back again my chest voice, because I couldn't have these two voices separately, one at a time. And I started with a jazz teacher. And then, in fact, I take my lessons 9 a.m. for having my low voice. And in fact, because I lost it completely. And it worked a little time. And then long story of life, I came in France, and I was always singing like bossa nova, jazz. In fact, I am a singer-songwriting from my young age, but I wanted also to be a singer, interpret, how you say that, interpret. So for having also this experience of singing others' music, I couldn't make a choice, in fact. I wanted to do everything. So it's a long journey. And I always sing in jazz, bossa nova, my songs. Here in France, I started to sing gospel. So, but I was asking this question always to me, is this possible to make a concert, for example, with gospel and lyric? And then I met Donna, and I asked this question, what do you think about? She told me, yes, it's totally possible. So we're working in that way. And I start to understand this different mechanism. Head and chest, or light or heavy mechanism. And in fact, I could continue this way, making in one concert with different styles of music. So sometimes lyric, kind of Ave Maria. I like so much sacred music, all kinds of sacred music. So with gospel and lyric going all over the different mix, because also French liturgical music, as the other singer Priya told, working in the church, there's this little range. We're always singing in the middle. So it's like head very lyrical, and then liturgical with that mix, medium mix, and this gospel with the more chest voice. And it's very challenging. because it's not as easy as if I was singing just one style of music, because I know how to sing jazz without problem, and bossa nova. I know the sound. I am very used to, but then I forget. I tend to forget what's the sound of lyrica, and when I get it, I tend to forget what is the other. So I have to be always doing everything. So I find it very challenging for a voice or for a person. But that's the path that I choose. That's why I'm so glad that I met Donna and Cornelius and all of the work, because it answer a question that no one could answer before in my life.
I think that this is a perfect segue into register balance, by the way. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I don't have to make any effort for that. But before I do, what's so interesting about that is I find that people who are artistic and people who have a creative spark, for lack of a better word, inside of them, they don't like to be only one type of thing. Right? You know, I know a lot of musicians who are painters. I know a lot of photographers who are film editors and who are you know, do all of the things, and they don't want to be pigeonholed into one thing. They're not, that's not their calling in the world, to do one thing. And so, you know, as we've said with all of us, we have multiple, I call myself a multi-hyphenate, right? When people are like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a multi-hyphenate. I can't say more, less than that. And it's actually started to be where people understand what that means. That's the thing that I've started to say, that people are like, oh, that's cool. So what are your things you're doing right now? And that's an easier thing for me to answer. But, you know, I love creative people, and I love the desire to branch out. But with that, Donna, to help us branch out and be able to do everything all of the time that we want to be doing, how do we, you know, what is the importance of balancing the registers, and like from a pedagogy state point of view, how does that work, and where do we go with that?
Well, the main thing to remember with all of that is the capital FELXI, well, I can't even spell, flexibility.
Like, what are we, Felix? The Felix.
ILITY. There we go. Okay. So flexibility, you know, as I have said before, classical people won't use the chest voice. Chesty people, Broadway, jazz, whatever, won't use the head voice. Everything's always a mix, and we always have to be flexible enough to have maybe more dominant chest voice in one piece of music, maybe more dominant head voice in another piece of music, maybe a different mix in a third piece of music. So it's not just one thing. It's really knowing what a chest voice is, knowing what a head voice is, and knowing how to put these two together or take them apart, have them separate, have them slightly balanced. Do I do a 50-50% chest voice, head voice? Do I do a 60-40 head voice, chest voice? Do I do a 60-40 chest voice, head voice? And knowing how to do those balances, then you could sing whatever it is you want to sing. It's really that simple. Now, it's not that simple to get the muscles coordinated in doing that. That's the more difficult thing, but that also has to do with flexibility of concept. And it also has to do with allowing yourself to make the sound that you want to make, not something that you think somebody else wants you to make. So if you're singing jazz, let's say you want a particular type of sound for jazz, but you don't want another sound for jazz, but you want that sound. Let's say classically too. Let's say your voice is intrinsically a warm voice for classical music. Well, that doesn't mean that you should sing a bright sound because somebody else says you need to sing a bright sound because they're doing Strauss as opposed to Puccini. So maybe you don't have a Strauss voice, maybe you have a Puccini voice, and then you decide which one you want to do. Do you know what I mean? And you could make it a little brighter for Strauss, but it's the same. Like some people can, let me put it this way also. Some people have a voice that can very easily belt musical theater, Ethel Merman. Some people don't. So, but maybe they can do a different kind of a mixie belt. Maybe not like the Ethel Merman type of belt, but a different kind of mixie belt. So a couple of things. Yes, you can sing whatever you want to sing. You could sing jazz, you could sing musical theater, you could sing classical. But then you have to say, but what does my voice do? How does my voice sound? What kind of jazz am I going to sing? What kind of musical theater am I going to belt? What kind of classical am I going to sing? So then you take what your intrinsic voice is, understanding what your chest voice is, what your head voice is, and how do you put these two together? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. One thing I want to ask Priya is, you know, in the moments where I think when you listen back, you're going to be surprised about what happened when Donna was like, just make it sound crazy. Don't worry about what happens. Just make it nuts. Because it was like a night and day difference on what it sounded like on the outside. So my question to you is, what does that sound like to you on the inside? Could you tell what happened? What was that like for you?
I could tell what happened. Yes, I think like knowing that we have listeners. I was a little shy about asking questions of Donna, like, can I mimic you? I know I'm not supposed to be mimicking you. Like, can you sing it to me? That was what was really helping me to bring my chest up a little bit further. And I just I it was hard for me to 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 feel confident, like just producing such an ugly sound that we don't use. Like it's just not a sound that is sung, and so therefore for me it's like, how it's not singable. Am I singing if I'm making this noise? So yeah, having that flexibility of concept that Donna's talking about is something that I need to like constantly practice. And but yeah, I could feel I was holding back, but I also was like, if I go harder, I'm gonna go off the rails. And so, but knowing, with a wonderful teacher, I would have been brought back. But I guess, yeah, the nerves. But I could tell that it was a slow process, slower than it may have been if maybe I was a little more comfortable and less nervous.
Sure, of course.
But yeah, I could definitely feel the difference. And it's so important to just be free and allow myself to go somewhere and trust that I can come back. And I don't know if I don't push the limit, if I need to come back. And that's with singing, something with like, when I was studying as a younger child, I never felt pushed to really explore. I just was always just like constantly vocalizing, but trying to sound good. And I think that limited me.
And I want to add that it takes a lot of courage just to allow your voice to do whatever in a regular lesson when nobody else is listening in. But when you're being taped and other people are watching in this, it takes a tremendous amount of courage. And I thank you all for having the courage to do that and just be vulnerable on tape. And I think that's very, very helpful for other singers because we're all vulnerable. And when we see somebody else being vulnerable, we're like, oh wow, okay, they can do it. They can just kind of put themselves out there. It's okay, I can put myself out there. It's giving courage to other people as well. So thank you for your courage and for doing this.
Probably. I'm going to open it up to the three of you, and then also to Donna, if you have anything specific you wanted to note in your lesson that you would like a little clarification on, or for somebody else's lesson that you'd like a little bit of clarification on for them from Donna.
I have a question for Donna about. Okay, so how do you successfully would sing multiple genres? Let's say that you're singing. Is it more about selecting a repertoire that aligns with your voice? How for example, if I were to sing something that's jazz and that's belty, how can I do that without affecting the classical work that I want to continue doing?
If you're singing it well, whatever the jazz or the belt or the musical theater, the pop, whatever, if you're singing it well, it should positively affect what you're doing. Now, That being said, let me give an example first. And no, let me say what I was going to say first. Okay, that being said, let's say you're going to sing an opera. Don't spend 3 days before singing the opera belting musical theater. That's clear. If you're doing, as Maria said, if you're doing a concert, it's your own concert. You could switch back and forth, do an aria, do a jazz piece, do a gospel piece, whatever. You should be able to choose whatever suits your voice in those genres, go back and forth and back and forth. But if you're singing a 4-hour opera, you know what, gear your voice toward that. Maybe don't do too much belty stuff. But then let's say you're doing belty stuff. Well, okay, maybe you want to keep that mix. You don't want to do too much of something classical. Do you know what I mean? You just be sensible about it. Now, that being said, I don't know if you know the name Stephanie Blythe. I'm sure most of my listeners will not know who that is. You know who that is. She's one of my favorite mezzo sopranos ever of all time. She's amazing. I've heard her sing at the Met many times. She's got this like jazz album where she is belting like a son of a gun. And you're like, what? This woman sings opera? Yes, she sings opera, and very, very well. So she's a perfect example of, yeah, you know what? I want to belt. So I'm going to make an album where I belt. And she does it very well. She doesn't do that weird fake opera belty thing, which sounds stupid.
Yeah.
Not at all. You would not know that this woman sings opera. And so she can do it. She made a whole album doing it. And then she probably turned around and, did La Principessa in Suor Angelica. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, you can definitely do that. You just have to be, know what you're singing and know what you're doing.
I'll add in also, Donna, with me, you kind of keep my whole voice going all the time. So, we work every lesson, we work my whole entire range. And I think you do that with most people. You kind of just get it, beep, boop, bop around. And just knowing where you are. And, sometimes something will knock itself off a little bit and we'll come back in and recalibrate and then go back up. How did that affect the top? How did that affect the bottom? And as long as it's, balanced all the way through, then when it's time for me to sing whatever the people want me to sing, then it's ready to go.
And that's a very, very good point. So let's say you're singing something really belty and all of that, and then you find that the high notes are not as easy. You're doing something wrong with the belt. Let's say you're singing the high notes and they're beautiful and you love them, and then you go try to belt and that's not working. There's something wrong with the high notes. If you're doing either of those two things and you lose the low notes, there's something wrong with one of those two things. So if you go from one thing to another and something is off, then whatever it was you were doing is not correct. And that's where people get into trouble. Yeah, I can belt, it sounds great. Oh, but I lost the high notes. Nope, then I don't care how it felt or sounded, something was wrong. So that's a way to test it out. Especially if you have easy low notes, whatever you're singing, if you lose those low notes, you're doing something wrong. Because then the vocal cords are getting overly tense in the wrong way and they can't relax enough to sing the low notes. That's how I used to sing opera. I would belt opera, is what I always say, and I would lose my low notes. And I'm like, oh, gee, okay, well, and then once I rested, then they would be back again. But sometimes if you take that to a certain degree, you lose the low notes permanently. And that's not a good thing. Then, of course, what was wrong with all kinds of different parts of my voice, Cornelius fixed. It took him 10 years, but he fixed it. And then I don't lose the low notes now when I sing high notes. So anyway, when that happens, that's a real indication that you're not going from one genre to the other in a good way.
Yeah. Well, and like any muscle, group, you can lose it so fast and it comes back. I mean, I'm just regaining my strength in my leg because I just had surgery, and my calf is it's gone. I have no calf. I have normally really big, strong calves, and my poor little calf is like, oh, and just walking, down the street now is like, oh, but it's not my knee. My knee is fine, but my calf is like, oh, I gotta rebuild that calf. So, when you lose that muscle group and you have to reconstruct it, basically, it takes, 3 times as long as it took you to, at least 3 times as long as it took you to lose it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, again, if one is stuck in one genre and it's always belty, 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 and you never do the high notes, you know what? That's gonna atrophy. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Same. If it's classical, and you never use the chest voice, that part of your voice will atrophy. So you always have to work all of it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Donna, do you have anything else you want to add to the discussion, or anything you want to ask the ladies, or points you want to bring?
No, I think we covered it. I think it's
Yeah.
good.
I think so too. So thank you all
Yeah.
for being viewers and for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for watching Donna Reed Talks Voice. If you have any questions for me about this episode, or if you'd like to join me on a future episode, please visit donnareedtv.com and click Contact.